Hi, my name's Aurelia. I built a company from the ground up, Aurora Tech. It was mine, every line of code, every sleepless night. But then I fell in love with a man who came with a family that smiled too wide, spoke too softly, and planned too quietly. I asked one question: why does your son inherit my company? And days before the wedding, his mother sent someone with a bottle of acid disguised as makeup. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the silence before it. The polite nods, the seating chart that didn't have my name, the group chat that called me the placeholder. They said I was marrying into legacy. But what if I was just being written out of my own story? They say every bride remembers her dress. I remember the color I wasn't allowed to wear. The boutique in downtown San Mateo smelled faintly of freesia and steamed silk. Racks of gowns hung like ghosts, each one whispering promises of the perfect day. I stood on the pedestal, the overhead lights casting a soft glow on the mirror. The dress fit like it was made for me. Strapless, clean-lined, nothing flashy, just elegant, just me. Then Valora entered the room. Her voice sliced through the air with that tone only practiced women of power possess. Sweet, but sharp. Darling, I've always felt white can be so severe under lighting. Don't you think champagne would flatter your tone more? My reflection didn't flinch, but my stomach did. Champagne? One of her friends chimed in, already sipping complimentary rosé. Yes, it's such a Crane family tradition. Soft golds, warm undertones. It photographs better. I looked down at the ivory satin hugging my hips. I always imagined white, I said, trying to sound breezy, non-confrontational. Valora stepped closer. Well, white is traditionally for Crane brides, since you're joining our family, but weren't raised in it. Champagne signals unity, not replacement. The words slid out of her mouth like silk. Polite. Final. I smiled. Not because I agreed, but because I knew what would happen if I didn't. In rooms like that, resistance isn't met with outrage. It's met with isolation. It wasn't about color. It was about control. I glanced at Hollis, who'd been on his phone the entire fitting. Do you have a preference? I asked. He didn't even look up. It's just a dress, babe. Let's keep her happy. That moment didn't knock the air out of me. It just confirmed what I'd been trying not to admit for weeks. I was emotionally alone in that room. Later, at the counter, the boutique manager handed over the invoice. Valora reached into her bag with the smoothness of someone who'd done this before. She slid out my credit card, my personal card, and handed it over like it was her own. I blinked. That's my card. Yes, sweetie, it's all taken care of, she said, scrawling her name across the authorization. I thought we were using the joint account for wedding expenses, I said softly. Valora didn't pause. Honey, we're family now. It's all the same pool. But it wasn't. Not to me. As they fussed over veil lengths and centerpiece mock-ups, I stood silently by the counter, watching my name flash on the payment terminal. No one asked. No one noticed. The stylist returned with fabric swatches. Champagne chiffon or satin blend? She asked, placing the two next to my skin. Valora leaned in and said, Satin. It softens her sharpness. They all nodded. That was the moment I stopped trying to belong. I walked into the restroom just to breathe. The lighting was unkind, fluorescent, clinical. I looked at myself, eyeliner smudged from blinking too much, lips pressed too tight. I'd grown up learning how to adjust, how to bend just enough to keep peace. Raised in foster homes, bounced from one town to the next, I had perfected the art of invisibility. But I wasn't 9 years old anymore. I wasn't some child desperate to be chosen. I was 34, and I had built Aurora Tech with no one's help. The investors didn't care where I came from. They cared that I delivered. And yet, here I was, letting someone erase my name one champagne stitch at a time. Everything okay in there? Valora called out from beyond the door. I flushed the toilet even though I hadn't used it. Be right out. Back in the boutique, they had already boxed the sample gown. Valora smiled, handed me a cookie from the counter. Sugar helps with hard choices. I took it, not because I was hungry, but because saying no would have made me look ungrateful. That's how women like her win. They don't shout, they sweeten the trap. We walked out to the sidewalk. The sunlight had softened, casting a warm haze over the boutique's gold signage. Valora waved down her driver while chatting about wedding favors, miniature jars of honey sourced from the Crane family farm. My phone buzzed. A new text message. I glanced down. Bank alert. A $14,000 transaction was approved on your card ending in 2207. My breath caught. Not from shock, but from inevitability. I looked up at the boutique's window. Inside, my dress was being packed. I saw the name on the receipt through the glass. Aurelia Garraway. It was the only place my name appeared that day. When I got home that afternoon, the first thing I noticed was the heavy white box waiting on my doorstep, embossed in gold foil. Atwell Crane Wedding Invitations. The font was ornate, overly elegant, the kind of style I would never pick. But that's how things had been unfolding lately. Quiet decisions made for me, framed as kindness. I brought the box inside and set it on the dining table. For a moment, I just stared at it, part of me hesitant to open it, like peeling back the lid would make something official that I hadn't agreed to. Still, I took the blade from the drawer, sliced the tape, and lifted the flap. Lavender tissue paper crinkled under my fingers. I pulled out the first invitation and held it up to the light. You are cordially invited to celebrate the marriage of Hollis Crane and the Crane family, it read. That was it. No mention of me, not my name, not even bride. My full name, Aurelia Garraway, was gone, as if I didn't exist. For a long moment, I just stood there. I read it again, slowly, searching for anything that might redeem it. Maybe I missed a line, a tag, an insert with my name on it, nothing. The phrase Valora had once said during an early brunch came back to me, dripping with false warmth. We're all one family now. At the time, it sounded inclusive. Today, it sounded like absorption. Then why did I feel like a ghost? I brought the card into the living room where Hollis was lounging, feet up on the ottoman, scrolling through something on his phone. Did you see the invites? I asked, holding it out. He glanced at it, grinned like a kid who just pulled a magic trick. Yeah, aren't they sharp? That finish pops. You don't see anything missing? I asked. He furrowed his brow, tilting his head. No, they're balanced, clean. That was the idea. Crane family unity. Minimalism? The designer said it's stronger without names cluttering the front. Stronger or more marketable? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. He gave a small laugh. Babe, don't do that. It's just branding. Crane sounds better than Garraway on a printed piece. I stared at him. He added, Besides, everyone knows who you are. You're the bride. But that's not what the card said. My voice was even. In every marriage, someone gets edited. Be careful, it's not you. My mentor once said that, and now I knew why she said it with such gravity. The edits had already begun. 2 days later, at a pre-wedding brunch hosted by Hollis's great-aunt, the final insult arrived, gift-wrapped in faux warmth. We were gathered around the long garden table, sipping mimosas and nibbling mini quiches, when the aunt pulled a printed invitation from her purse and waved it. Darling, she said, turning to me with exaggerated kindness, I didn't realize your name was Aurelia. I thought it was Amelia or something. She laughed. My eyesight's gone to hell. Everyone chuckled, except me, except Hollis, who said nothing, not a correction, not a smile in my direction, not even a tap on her shoulder to say, actually, she's my fiancé. I didn't flinch. I smiled, small, tight. But inside, something calcified. You don't disappear all at once. It starts with your name being optional. That night, after the brunch, I returned home alone. Hollis had gone to a quick family meeting at the venue. I wasn't invited to that either. While cleaning up emails at the kitchen counter, I noticed Hollis's laptop left open, lid slightly ajar. The screen glowed faintly with an open group chat thread. I didn't mean to look, but I did. The chat header read, Crane Legacy Wedding Coordination. There were messages from Valora, Hollis's cousin Mara, 2 uncles, and even the family PR consultant. Each message hit a little harder than the last. She acts like she built the company. Such a self-starter, but we all know who provides the foundation. She should be grateful she's marrying into stability. And the one that made my pulse stall. What's the placeholder up to today? My name, right there in the chat, used as a nickname, the placeholder. I didn't cry, I didn't slam the laptop shut. I just took out my phone and began taking screenshots. One after another. Quietly. Methodically. Then I emailed them to myself with the subject line. Just in case. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. My arms folded over my stomach like a shield. The room was silent, except for the occasional hum of traffic outside. Hollis hadn't come home yet. My phone buzzed. Reminder. Dress fitting tomorrow. Valora requested a stylist change. I didn't move. Didn't react. Just stared at the screen. And for the first time, not in anger, not in despair, but with absolute clarity, I thought, they're not planning a wedding. They're planning my erasure. I woke before the alarm, the kind of waking that doesn't come from rest, but from something gnawing underneath. The Crane family group chat from the night before still played in my head like a looped recording. The placeholder, they called me, and not a single person corrected it. I got out of bed and pulled on the first sweater I could find. The early morning air coming off the Pacific always carried a bite, especially in the spring. I stepped out onto the balcony, letting the fog roll over my bare arms. From the third floor, I couldn't see the ocean, but I could feel it, heavy and gray and unapologetically real, just like me. The city was just beginning to wake. A few early joggers passed below. A delivery truck parked across the street. Life moved on, unbothered. But I stood there, still, remembering something Amos Vanderleer once told me after a botched investor pitch in our early days. When they stop calling your name, call your own. Loud enough to echo. That sentence never left me. I turned away from the balcony and walked back inside. On a whim, or maybe it wasn't a whim, maybe I'd always known I'd need this moment, I opened the storage closet and pulled down a cedar chest I hadn't touched since I'd moved in. Inside were pieces of Eleonora, my foster mother, my first real home. I opened the lid. The scent of aged paper and lavender sachets hit me like a hug from the past. Her letters, clipped articles, some of my old school photos. There, near the bottom, a sealed envelope I didn't recognize. It was yellowed, but clean, and across the front, in her tight, teacher-perfect handwriting, "Open when you doubt your place." My hands shook a little as I opened it. Inside was a black and white photo of the lease from our first apartment. Eleonora had added my name to it. Aurelia Garraway, even though legally she didn't have to. I wasn't her daughter on paper. But to her, I was never just the girl she took in. I was hers. Folded inside the photo was a note, 6 words only. No one gives you space. You claim it. I don't remember crying, but when I blinked, my cheeks were damp. Not from sadness, more like affirmation. My worth wasn't tied to Valora's approval or Hollis's silence. It was right here. Always had been. That morning, I canceled my meetings, turned off my phone, and sat in that memory until the sun cleared the fog completely. A flash of another memory hit me. It wasn't a document or a file. It was Eleonora's voice, sharp but gentle, during one of our last long walks. "You can love someone fully," she'd said, "and still lose yourself if you're not watching." At the time, I waved it off. Hollis had just proposed. I was glowing, floating. I told her he wasn't like the others, that he respected me, saw me. She nodded, but she didn't look convinced. Now, months later, sitting with her words echoing in my mind, I realized I hadn't just ignored her warning, I had betrayed it. And worse, I'd betrayed myself. My phone buzzed. An email from the Business Observer Weekly. Subject line: The Crane Family's Rise in Tech. Digital edition now live. I tapped the link. There was a picture of Aurora Tech's newest product launch, an event I had built from the ground up. The article praised the Crane family's vision, quoting Hollis and Valora extensively. My name? Not there. Not even in the footnotes. I stared at the screen, jaw clenched, a dull pressure forming behind my eyes. They weren't just pushing me aside, they were writing me out, erasing me, as if I had never existed, as if I hadn't poured a decade of my life into this company, this name, this purpose. I opened my photos, took a screenshot of the article, and saved it to a folder I'd created the night before. Title: Truth. Not for now, but soon. Later that evening, I sat on my couch holding one of Eleonora's worn paperbacks, unread in my hands. I wasn't thinking about the dress, the invitations, or even the acid comment from the chat. I was thinking about that lease, the way she'd claimed me without needing a court order. No ceremony, no performance, just intention. I looked over at my calendar, then tapped open my laptop. I navigated to my legal directory and scheduled a consult. Tomorrow, I wasn't going to play defense anymore. One last glance at the lease photo, and I whispered into the room, "You gave me a name. I'm done letting them unwrite it." I walked back into the bridal boutique with a silent determination stitched into every step. I told the receptionist I was there for my final fitting, but really, I just needed to see for myself what I was becoming part of and what I was letting slip away. The stylist greeted me with a soft smile, the kind reserved for someone who's been talked about before she arrives. "I've made the adjustments to the champagne gold fabric per Mrs. Crane's notes," she said, gently pulling the altered gown from its padded hanger. I stared at it. It wasn't the dress I chose. It wasn't even a version of it. It was a new thing entirely, one that whispered compromise before I ever said, "I do." "I didn't approve a color change," I said calmly. The stylist blinked, glancing at the clipboard in her hands. "I was told the family had aligned on a final selection." "Who is the family?" I asked, and she didn't answer. I stepped into the fitting room, alone this time. No mother-in-law, no bridesmaids. Just me and a mirror and a dress I didn't recognize. As she zipped the gown up the back, I stared at myself and said under my breath, "This time, they won't alter me without my consent." She pinned the hem in silence, and I let her. But my mind wasn't there. It was already rewriting the script. This wasn't going to be a slow erasure. This was going to be a sharp redirection. Midway through the fitting, the front bell rang. I knew that voice too well. Hollis entered with Valora trailing close behind, carrying a sleek black folder. "You two always know how to make an entrance," I said dryly, stepping off the pedestal. Valora approached, kissing the air beside my cheek like we were starring in some strange play neither of us auditioned for. "We thought we'd swing by. You know, make sure things are seamless." She held out the folder. "And while we're here, we wanted to go over this with you." Just standard procedure. The label read, "Protective Financial Agreement." Of course it did. "It's normal," she cooed. "Everyone does it these days, especially with significant assets involved." Her smile never cracked. "And we all know you're the successful one, darling." I opened it. My fingers didn't tremble. My voice didn't rise. But something inside me snapped clean. "So this isn't about protection," I said. "It's about position." Hollis looked up, surprised by the edge in my tone. Valora didn't blink. "It's just to ensure there's clarity. You know how messy things can get without definition." "I've never been afraid of definition," I said, then handed the folder back. "I'm not signing this." Hollis exhaled like I'd just embarrassed them in a boardroom. "You're being paranoid," he said. That word, it sank into me like ice water. "No," I replied. "I'm being precise. There's a difference." We stood there, a triangle of tension surrounded by silk and glass. Valora broke the silence first. "You don't have to decide right now. Take your time. It's only a signature." But that's the thing. A signature is never just a signature. It's a surrender. And I had signed too many invisible contracts already. I left early. Back home, I made tea and opened my laptop, trying to focus on work. My design team had just finalized the new Aurora branding package, and I wanted to give feedback before they sent it to print. But when I clicked the link, my throat went dry. The homepage mock-up read, "Crane Systems. Innovation for the future. No Aurora, no Garaway, just Crane." I scrolled through. The About page had Hollis's name listed first. My bio had been deleted. I checked the version history. The last edit had been made from Hollis's account. If you erase a name, you're not rebranding. You're rewriting history. I didn't even bother calling him. What was I going to say? That I noticed? That I cared? He already knew I did. Later that night, Hollis and I sat at dinner with Valora, at her request. The restaurant was quiet, candlelit, a place that served duck confit like it was casual. Valora cut into her salmon with surgical elegance. "We've been thinking," she said lightly, "about consolidating family assets. It just makes sense under one umbrella." I raised a brow. "What kind of umbrella?" She smiled. "The Crane umbrella, of course." "And Aurora Tech?" I asked. "Well, it would be silly to keep dividing when you're about to be one." I stared at my plate. I didn't work this hard to merge into someone else's legacy. Hollis stabbed his steak, said nothing. By the time we left, I had said all I needed to say. I walked home alone. That night, at 3 a.m., I opened a blank document on my computer. Title, Contingency. First line, if anything happens to me before the wedding. I didn't know what I was preparing for, but I knew I wasn't walking into it blind. The ballroom was all crystal and pretense. Valora's charity gala, draped in navy and silver, was in celebration of women in tech, which would have been amusing if I weren't the ghost funding the venue. I walked in alone, unannounced, unwelcomed. Not one camera flash turned in my direction, though my signature sat on every donation check printed for the night. I scanned the rows of place cards at the head tables. Crane, Hollis Crane. My name was missing. I found my seat near the service entrance, wedged between the event planner and someone from catering operations. No glass centerpiece, no engraved napkin ring, no mic in reach. I paid for this room, and yet I was treated like I snuck in. Valora stood center stage in a midnight blue gown, a diamond brooch winking beneath the lights. When the room settled, she smiled into the microphone. "We are here because vision runs in families," she began. "And because the Crane legacy has always made space for brilliance." Applause. She turned slightly toward Hollis, who was seated front and center beside city officials. "And now, with my son stepping into the next chapter of our firm's evolution, I see that same brilliance continuing." I sipped my wine. "Behind every great man," Valora added, her eyes sweeping the room but never landing on me, "is a woman strong enough to follow." The crowd chuckled. A few even clapped. My grip on the stem of the glass tightened. I didn't shatter it. I'd been raised better than that. But I let the sting of that line carve its lesson. They didn't see me as a partner. They saw me as packaging. After the speech, I watched Hollis from across the room. He was laughing, shaking hands with a donor, tossing his head back like a man who believed the spotlight was his birthright. I waited for his gaze to find me. It never did. I rose from the table and slipped out through the side door. The balcony was cool, the night breeze wrapping around me like clarity. Far below, the valet line twisted with Teslas and black sedans. I stared at the streetlights until the sting behind my eyes faded. I didn't need Hollis to defend me. I just needed him to see me. And he didn't. Later, back at home, I found him already on the couch, scrolling headlines. "Pretty good turnout tonight," he said, not looking up. "Sure," I said. "They liked the Crane panel," he added. "PR wants to build a post-event story around it. We'll lead with the family narrative. I think that's strong." I didn't interrupt. I didn't argue. He talked for 20 more minutes, about investors, impressions, how donors loved Valora's message, about optics, about scalability, about buzzwords he never used before she coached him. I just sat, phone in hand, microphone app recording in the background. My thumb pressed stop only after he finished his final sentence. "We're finally positioned right." Sometimes the most powerful thing isn't what you say, it's what you keep. At dawn, I brewed a single cup of coffee and sat at my desk in the quiet. I opened a new document. Title, "This isn't surrender, this is strategy." And I began writing a resignation letter from my own company. I didn't send it, not yet, but I wrote every word with the kind of clarity that no speech, no stage, and no seating chart could strip from me. It started with a denied login. I was in my home office, a sliver of morning light slipping between the blinds, trying to approve a vendor payment for our upcoming software launch. I typed my credentials twice, then 3 times. System access denied. Insufficient privileges. At first I thought it was a bug. Then I checked the internal admin panel, also locked. That's when the chill settled into my spine. I called Dana, our CFO. She answered quickly, too quickly, like she'd been expecting me. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice level. "I'm locked out of the back end. Any idea what's going on?" There was a beat of silence. "The board approved the restructure yesterday. The transfer documents were processed and filed." "What transfer documents?" "The ones you signed. Hollis brought them in directly." "I didn't sign anything." Another pause. "Aurelia, your name was on them." I ended the call without saying goodbye. My hands were shaking but steady enough to open my inbox. No alerts, no warnings. Nothing but the smooth, quiet machinery of a hostile takeover wrapped in family branding. By noon, I was driving to the Crane estate. I didn't call ahead. I wanted to see their faces when I said it. Valora answered the door, always so gracious when she knew she held the upper hand. "Aurelia, darling, you look pale. Are you eating?" "Is Hollis home?" I asked. "Of course, come in." The parlor was overly bright, too many windows, too much glass. Hollis sat in one of the leather armchairs, sipping something dark. When he saw me, he smiled like a man who'd just ironed out a wrinkle. "We were going to tell you," he said. "You submitted transfer documents with my signature," I said. "You've been under a lot of stress," he offered. "Maybe you just forgot?" Valora nodded, ever the chorus behind the solo. "We just wanted to ease the burden on your plate. The timing was sensitive. We didn't want to worry you." "Worry me?" I repeated. "And," she continued gently, "we think it might be helpful to speak to someone. I know a therapist, discreet, excellent with executive burnout." That's when I saw it. They weren't just stealing my company. They were building a narrative where I didn't even know what I'd done, where I was too overwhelmed to be trusted, too emotional, too female. I wasn't paranoid. I was under attack. I didn't argue. I left. But I didn't go home. I went to Amos. His office sat above a bookstore, tucked between a notary and a barber shop that hadn't changed signage since the 80s. It was exactly the kind of place where truth could hide in plain sight. He opened the door himself. "I saw your name on a filing this morning," he said. "I figured you'd be here." We sat across from each other, no coffee, no small talk. I handed him the forwarded board packet Dana had sent. Amos skimmed it, frowning. "Looks tight." "Signature matches your digital records." "It's not mine." He turned to his monitor and pulled up archived contracts I'd actually signed. Then he opened the metadata. "They used a sample stroke pattern," he said. "It's close. But this curve here, see that bend? That's not yours." He looked up. "This was executed without your consent. We have grounds." "I want everything frozen," I said. "Accounts, titles, shares. I want a full injunction." He leaned back. "It'll be war. Then let's build a battlefield." By nightfall, I was back home, the air stale with hours of strategy and silent resolve. I turned on one lamp in the corner and sat down with my laptop. I opened my encrypted drive and created a new folder. Title: Evidence, Phase 1. I uploaded the audio from the Crane estate. Then I hit record and spoke clearly into the mic. They forged my name. Now I write my story. The smallest discrepancies are always the loudest. I noticed one Tuesday morning while reviewing a team update. Our community engagement budget line showed a withdrawal I hadn't approved. Then another. 2 vendor transfers marked consolidation prep. That wasn't language we used. I dug deeper. A few email threads were oddly truncated. Dates didn't match timestamps. When I tried to pull older messages between Valora and the legal consultants, they were gone, no trace. I had admin access. I shouldn't have found gaps. Late that afternoon, Malis passed my desk. She didn't stop, just brushed by and dropped a flash drive into my coffee tray like it was a sugar packet. She whispered without turning her head, "You didn't hear it from me." I didn't move until I was alone. I plugged it in. The folder had no name, just a series of PDFs and a dated scan labeled Prenup VC 197. I clicked. The document was old but intact. A scanned copy of Valora's own exit agreement from Crane Capital when her marriage to Hollis's father had ended. It was nearly identical, word for word, to the draft she'd presented to me 2 weeks ago in the boutique. Paragraphs mirrored, phrasing matched. Even the protective clauses about intellectual property were templated. She hadn't just tried to erase me, she'd replicated her own wound, handed me her pain like it was an inheritance. There was a knock against memory, a flash from a holiday dinner 2 years ago, before the engagement. Valora had passed around photos of the original Crane boardroom, her name once embossed under the title Executive Director. She said it with sugar. They took everything with a smile. That's how men prefer a battle won. I remember how her eyes glazed. I thought it was nostalgia. It wasn't. It was unfinished revenge. I closed the folder and stared at the screen, pulse drumming against my collarbone. The pattern wasn't just about power. It was a playbook, and I wasn't the first one in it. By Friday, I learned Melis had been let go. The HR email cited restructuring, nothing more. No explanation for why the only person who had flagged inconsistencies in my accounts was now unemployed. But I knew. In her desk drawer, the one we used to share snacks in, she had left a note folded between 2 file dividers. It read, "You were never crazy. You were the threat." I didn't cry. I didn't storm into a boardroom. I sat in my car and stared at the steering wheel for 30 silent minutes. Then I drove to our downtown headquarters, walked up 15 floors, and walked into the strategy meeting I wasn't invited to. They were all there. Valora, Hollis, the board's attorney, and the same consultant who'd tried to brief me once then mysteriously disappeared. "Afternoon," I said, tossing my bag on the end of the table. Valora didn't look surprised. "We're in a private session, Aurelia." I pulled a printed copy of her 1997 prenup from my tote and slid it across the polished wood. "Then let's talk about tradition." They all went still. "This is déjà vu with a new victim," I said. Valora tilted her head, lips curving. "You misunderstand." "I understand perfectly," I cut in. "You're trying to stage a rerun. You lost once, and now you're rewriting the ending with me." Hollis said nothing. Of course he didn't. I turned to him. "You know this isn't strategy, it's legacy laundering." Still silence. I gathered my things and left. Not broken. Burning. That night, I brewed chamomile and sat at my laptop. I logged into the podcast dashboard I hadn't touched in 2 years. Title field. Burned but not broken. Episode 00. Subtitle. The Playbook. I didn't hit publish, but I saved it. Because the next time they underestimated me, I'd meet them on their own frequency. I arrived at the venue earlier than scheduled, a full hour before the final fitting. The place was too quiet for a morning that was supposed to hum with wedding prep. The staff moved slower, eyes darting in my direction, lips tight around forced smiles. Even the air felt off, stale, like something unspoken hung in it. "Morning, Ms. Garraway," the stylist greeted me, a little too rehearsed. "Valora said you might come early." I nodded, but said nothing. I scanned the room. New faces. A security guard near the front entrance who hadn't been there last week. And near the dressing area, a young assistant with slicked back hair, pretending to scroll through her phone. I didn't recognize her. The gown was already steamed and hanging on the hook. But before I could step into the dressing area, the assistant stepped forward. "I was told to help with final touch-ups," she said, lifting a silver case that resembled a makeup artist's kit. Her voice didn't match her face. Too steady. Too flat. She placed the case on the vanity counter, unlatched it, and started pulling out brushes and a few nondescript bottles. "I'll just brighten up your highlights," she said. I hesitated. Something in my chest itched. She uncapped one bottle, knocked it slightly against the counter, and the liquid spilled. It hissed. The varnish on the edge of the vanity bubbled instantly, discoloring into black streaks. The assistant's eyes widened. The stylist gasped, stepping back. "That wasn't supposed to be opened here," the stylist whispered. The girl froze for half a second, then snapped the case shut, grabbed her tote, and ran out the door before anyone could stop her. No one chased her. I pulled out my phone, snapped a photo of the scorched vanity, then bent down, ripping off a small strip of the stained fabric lining. The smell, chemical, sour, burned my nostrils. I wasn't shaking. I was cold. Cold and clear. "They just tried to end more than a wedding," I whispered, barely recognizing my own voice. After calming the stylist with a tight-lipped, "I'll handle it," I walked directly to the front office and requested security footage from the last 2 hours. I didn't explain. I didn't need to. Back home, I uploaded the footage and scanned through it. There she was, the assistant, being let in by someone familiar, Valora's personal driver. A man I'd seen open car doors, carry handbags, smile during luncheons. So this wasn't an accident. This wasn't sabotage. This was strategy. I didn't go to the police, not yet. Instead, I added the fabric sample, the photos, the video stills, and the full security clip to my encrypted archive. They weren't just trying to scare me, they were betting on my silence. By nightfall, I turned on every light in my home studio. I wore a simple black sweater. No makeup, no script. I hit record. "My name is Aurelia Garraway," I began, voice steady. "Today, someone tried to harm me, not my business, not my brand, me." I held up the stained fabric, showed the footage of the bubbling varnish, spoke through the full sequence. "I have tried to be respectful," I continued. "I have swallowed more than I care to remember. But silence is not civility, and survival is not obedience." I paused. This was an attack. But I'm not the victim they thought I'd be. I ended the video, didn't cry, didn't collapse. I saved the file to 3 different encrypted drives. I backed it up to cloud storage. I logged out. Then I picked up my phone and texted Amos. "We're not waiting for the wedding. We go tomorrow." I got there before anyone else. That was deliberate. I wanted to walk the room before the stage was set, before the chairs were filled with people clapping for a ceremony they didn't understand. The venue was quiet, humming with floral staff and clipboard-holding coordinators giving orders in hushed tones. Bouquets of pale hydrangeas lined the aisle. Ribbons matched the exact hue of champagne gold, Valora insisted, represented the Crane legacy. I walked slowly, letting my heels echo against the polished floor, eyes scanning the signage. Hollis's name appeared in cursive on a welcome banner beside the words, "The Crane family welcomes you." My name, once again, was missing. I made my way to the reception layout near the head table. There, under a spotlight chandelier, was a card that read, "Mrs. Crane." Nothing else, not my first name, not Aurelia, not CEO, not founder, just an empty title waiting to swallow me whole. They weren't planning to include me. They were planning to absorb me. And today, they'd learn I don't dissolve. I waited until the team began the final run-through. Hollis wasn't there yet. Valora stood center, giving instructions to the AV team. I slipped to the side of the stage and handed a flash drive to the technician. "Swap this with the rehearsal slides," I said calmly. "Run it when she calls for the tribute video." He looked hesitant. Valora said, "I'm the bride," I said. "That means I'm still allowed a voice." He nodded. The seating started to fill with family and close friends for the closed-door run. Hollis arrived 15 minutes in, smiling like a politician. I didn't greet him. I stayed seated 3 rows back, watching. Valora stood again, lifting a glass of champagne. "We've built a future, a name, a platform, and now we celebrate legacy." She cued for the tribute reel. Instead, the screen lit up black, then faded into footage. Audio from the secret meeting. Valora, calm and deliberate, discussing ownership transition with their attorney. "The company's stable now. She served her purpose." Hollis's voice. "We'll say she needed rest, that she stepped back willingly." Then the screen cut to the boutique footage, the bubbling surface of the acid-burned vanity, the assistant fleeing. Still shots of security footage, time-stamped, the group chat thread. The placeholder. Then the voiceover, mine. "This is no longer my wedding. This is my line in the sand." The room froze. You could feel the air collapse. Someone stood up. A woman gasped. Hollis looked like he'd been hit in the chest. Valora didn't blink. The video faded to black. The silence was deafening. I stood. No one stopped me. I walked toward the front, past stunned faces and dropped jaws. Hollis stepped in front of me. His voice broke. Aurelia, this isn't what you think. I met his eyes. You could have stood with me. You chose comfort instead. I walked out the main doors, the echo of my heels louder than the applause I never got. Outside, the air was sharp, clean. I didn't wait for a car. I walked 3 blocks before pulling out my phone. A text from Amos. Media just picked it up. It's everywhere. I paused on the sidewalk, watching the city go on like nothing had shattered inside that venue. They tried to bury me in silence. Now they'd be buried in volume. I woke to 27 missed calls, a dozen news alerts, and my name trending on 3 platforms. They were calling me the Acid Bride. It wasn't a label I wanted, but it was one they gave me. And this time, they couldn't take it back. The video had been leaked overnight. I still don't know how. It wasn't me, and it wasn't Amos. But someone had access. Maybe a technician. Maybe someone in the crowd who'd recorded the tribute reel and uploaded it to Reddit before the rehearsal dinner even ended. It didn't matter. The story was out. And it wasn't just mine anymore. I pulled a sweatshirt over my head, grabbed my keys, and walked to the corner coffee shop, phone still buzzing in my pocket. I just needed a moment of normal. People stared. Some whispered. But the barista, a girl I'd seen a dozen times and never once spoke to, looked me straight in the eye as she slid over my latte and said, "Good for you." It wasn't about caffeine anymore. This wasn't a private war. It had become a public reckoning. By noon, I released the podcast, the full episode. Burned, but not broken. My voice opened with calm clarity. No anger. Just chronology. I told them everything. How Aurora Tech began in a shared garage behind a duplex. How Valora once smiled at me like a mentor before slipping documents behind my back. How the dress fitting wasn't about fashion and the table card wasn't about aesthetics. How I was erased. Then came the audio. Valora's voice speaking over coffee about the power transition. Then the footage, the acid bottle, the assistant, the chair. And finally, my words. When you erase a woman's name from the story, she writes a new one louder. That clip alone was shared by 3 senators, 2 women's foundations, and a former CEO who left her husband after seeing the video. By nightfall, the backlash had teeth. Valora issued a statement calling it a coordinated media ambush, but within hours, old interviews surfaced, her contradicting herself about her role in the family company, screenshots of group chats, comments from dismissed employees. Corporate sponsors began pulling support from Crane-aligned charities. Hollis was photographed dragging a suitcase out of the family estate, head down, alone. Amos called that evening. "It's happening," he said. "The story's taking care of the rest." I didn't need revenge, I told him. I needed the truth to echo. And it did. 2 days later, one of the donor campaigns that had quietly listed Hollis as founder of their tech initiative suddenly changed. Now it said, founded by Aurelia Garraway, 2015. No apology, just a silent correction. But that was enough. Others followed. Statements from organizations, some of them heartfelt, some of them clearly lawyered. One even wrote, "We regret not verifying more thoroughly." I didn't gloat. "They always knew who built it," I said to Amos over coffee. "They just needed a reminder." That afternoon, a courier arrived with a small envelope. No sender. Just my name. Inside was a Polaroid. An old one. Valora in her early 30s, standing in front of a conference table, smiling. Alone. Someone had circled her in red pen. Tucked behind it was a note, printed in courier font. "This was never about you. It was about the version of me I couldn't save." I stared at the photo long after the sun dipped below the city skyline. And when the next knock came, firm, intentional, I stood up slowly. The story wasn't done yet. The envelope still sat on my kitchen counter where I'd left it days ago. I hadn't touched it since, not even after everything exploded. I wasn't avoiding it, I just wasn't ready for what it represented. But that morning, with the light pouring through the blinds in soft strips and the house finally quiet. I reached for it. The Polaroid slipped out first. Valora, younger, radiant, standing in a boardroom that looked a lot like the one they'd nearly pushed me out of. Red pen circled her figure, and the note was still there. This was never about you. It was about the version of me I couldn't save. I placed it next to the oldest letter I still had from Eleonora. The paper had gone thin and yellow at the edges, her handwriting still firm, still so her. It said nothing about business, family, or legacy. Just, you deserve to be the author of your own name. I whispered. It always is, though. Always about the woman erased. The silence in the room felt full, not empty. Like it was holding something for me until I was ready to hold it myself. Later that day, I met an old colleague for lunch. Nia, one of the first engineers who worked with me when Aurora Tech was still run out of my kitchen. We hadn't seen each other in years. She hugged me like nothing had changed, but over coffee, she paused mid-sentence, tilted her head, and asked the question that would sit with me long after we left the cafe. I always thought Aurora was yours, she said. Was I wrong? It wasn't an accusation, it was honesty, and it cut deeper because of that. I answered slowly. It was. Then they almost convinced me I was just borrowing it. She didn't apologize. She didn't need to. That wasn't what this was about. After we parted, I walked to the office building downtown, Aurora's headquarters. The board had removed Valora the day after the video surfaced. Hollis had been suspended indefinitely. My access had been reinstated. The elevator ride was quiet. I stepped out into a space that used to pulse with my fingerprints. Now it felt foreign. My nameplate still sat in the bottom drawer of the reception desk. No one had thrown it out, but no one had put it back either. I didn't place it on the door. I slipped it into my bag. I didn't need the desk to matter anymore. Later that evening, I returned to the venue, the one where I was supposed to get married. It was empty now, stripped of decor and flowers, the chairs stacked, the lights dimmed. Just a shell of what never happened. I walked to the spot where my chair had been, where the card had read, Mrs. Crane. I sat, no music, no guests, just the whisper of my heels against the marble and the echo of a life I didn't choose. Some ghosts don't haunt you. They just stand behind you in silence, waiting to see if you'll repeat them. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just sat until the silence stopped feeling like grief and started feeling like clarity. That night, I sat in my studio. I opened a new draft, a public letter, not a takedown, not a threat, just a declaration. It ended like this. To every woman who was told she was too much, too bold, too loud, I see you, and you're not alone. I hovered over publish, and when I pressed send, I didn't feel the world fall apart. I felt it open. I didn't watch the headlines roll in. I didn't refresh feeds or read threads or scroll through the sea of reactions. The world didn't need me to chase validation. I had already said what I needed to say. The morning after my letter went live, Valora's name was scrubbed from 2 advisory boards. A third issued a statement calling her incompatible with the ethical direction of the organization. Hollis issued a resignation from his public-facing positions, quietly, without photos or speeches. And me? I sat on my reupholstered sofa in an apartment no longer designed by someone else's taste. The walls were sage now, the lighting soft. The silence, finally, wasn't empty. The louder the crash, the calmer I chose to be. That week, I was invited to speak at a tech gala, the same stage Valora once claimed as her playground. The crowd buzzed with reporters, executives, old colleagues who had once ignored my emails. I wore a black pantsuit. No train, no veil. The host's voice echoed over the mic. Please welcome our keynote, the former Mrs. Crane. I stepped onto the stage, took the mic, and smiled. Correction, just Aurelia Garraway, and that's more than enough. The room rose to its feet. They didn't applaud the scandal, they applauded the clarity. Days later, I opened the podcast again. This time, not for fire, but for legacy. I read the letter I'd received, the one with Valora circled in red ink. This time, I didn't flinch. Sentence by sentence, I broke it down. Not to expose her, but to explain her. to unravel how unhealed pain folds into control, how silence isn't always strength and loudness isn't always threat. Her pain wasn't mine to fix, but stopping the cycle, that part was mine. The next evening, I hosted a dinner. No ballroom, no drone cameras, no guest list filled with strategic names, just one long table, real wood, no place cards, except I'd written each name by hand. Women from shelters. Colleagues I once lost to burnout. Friends who once whispered, "Maybe this isn't for me." I served the food myself, steak, the kind I was told I didn't deserve once. No one here had to ask why they were allowed to eat well. They just did. A week later, the foundation launched. Eleonora Equity. The first certificate I signed was for a girl named Tessa. 14. Bright eyes. Big questions. She stood on stage, gripping the award like it weighed more than it did. I shook her hand. "Your name matters," I told her. And she nodded like she already knew. As the lights dimmed, someone asked me if I ever regretted giving up the company. "No," I said. "Let them keep their chairs. I'm building floors. And if they ever try to rewrite me again, I'll remind them I own the pen."